It seems like we're talking about Assassin's Creed Odyssey.
It seems we are. Did you know AC Odyssey has multiple endings?
Yes, I know. I have access to the internet and can retrieve information at great speeds.
I don't think this conversation is going to be much fun for me.
Well, it might still be informative for me even though I am vastly superior in intellect compared to yourself. What I don't quite understand is why are we talking about AC Odyssey in the first place?
I'm glad you asked. You see, AC Odyssey was the first of the AC games that tried to implement dialogue as an interactive feature of the game. For years, AC games were shunned for their long dialogue segments and forced walk-in chats, which took away from the immersion of the game. Character interaction was going to fundamentally change with dialogue options which slightly alter the relationship your character has with the characters of the game world. This was one of the main points the developers spoke about before the game was released.
I do recall there being such a video in my database.
The way we build relationships in a game is by investing time with characters, but the small decisions that you'll make will have, little quirks on your storyline.
Since I haven't played the game, could you tell me more about the game from a human perspective?
I'm going to let you in on a little secret. It has to be kept between you and me though, alright?
My mouth is sealed.
I never finished the game. I got too bored, and one of the reasons for that was the dialogue between the characters sucks.
I don't think I can keep that to myself. So, why does the dialogue suck?
Dialogue between your character and the NPCs feels bland. When engaging in conversation, you get a list of options to select from. These conversation points, while sounding as if they tell you key information for the mission and subplot, add very little to the conversation and waste time. I found myself mostly mashing the next button when listening to the white dialogue options quite early on after realizing that they didn't really influence the story, and then completely skipping them in the bid to save time and get on with the actual game. Most of these dialogue points are written in white, which aren't even the ones that affect your relationship with said NPC. Most conversations in the game consist of 3 to 4 white dialogue options which can continuously be asked, as these points don't disappear after clicking on them and listening to the response. And then one golden dialogue option, which is usually a goodbye message, and these are the ones which influence the story. A very intriguing style of dialogue indeed.
I sense some sarcasm in that last sentence.
Well picked up on.
So what did you think the dialogue was going to be like?
In my mind, I thought the dialogue was going to be closer to the Fallout games, where you choose a dialogue path and once selected, you get to continue with the same dialogue path / attitude. Or you can switch your attitude in the conversation by selecting a different dialogue option, which results in a dynamic conversation as the NPCs remember the dialogue options that were selected earlier in the conversation. The dialogue in Odyssey, on the other hand, doesn't emulate this, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. However, the way the dialogue is implemented in Odyssey isn't an improvement on the system. The developers presented the dialogue in this game as a way to gradually change the relationship between characters. And while some conversations do allow for this, with more than one golden dialogue option, most of the dialogue is awkward. Usually there's 2 options in the dialogue prong. One option is sensible and makes your character sound like a human being, and then the other is overly sarcastic or judgmental, which makes your character sound like an insufferable dick.
I hope you don't feel like that about me.
I'm not going to comment on that.
If you can't comment on that, can you comment on the developers' thoughts on the dialogue system in Odyssey?
Now, the developers admitted to giving the player the illusion of choice by stating that the story is completely scripted. You merely follow a path to get to the end, with freedom to form relationships with NPCs in a personalized way. Imagine it like a split in the road, but then a little while later the 2 paths rejoin at a later point. And this happens continuously throughout the game. Coming back to the point I made earlier, you can choose to have the NPCs think you to be a normal human being or think that you are a dick, as if those are the only 2 personality types. But ultimately, there is no change to the story.
But even if there is no change to the story, doesn't having dialogue change your experience of the game?
The dialogue certainly changed my experience of the game by adding extra time to the playthrough when it wasn't needed. Along with a lot of dialogue being inconsequential to your knowledge of the game or the way that you play the game, It would have been a great experience if the white dialogue options gave you important information about directions on how to find a particular item, or descriptions of characters that you need to track. Things which actually impact the gameplay in a dynamic way. In addition to that, the developer stated that choice is the most important aspect of Odyssey, and to emphasize this point, they've given the players choice of which character they can play the game as. However, this choice feels unimportant to say the least at face value, and even less important as you play the game. The choice of character isn't a very informed, grand choice when we don't even know anything about them as characters or their personalities, just what they look like, and that they are male and female. And when you find out that both characters have the same dialogue options and scripted conversations, that choice of character is even less important. But hey, I guess you can put a different looking armor on the characters that you choose. Probably the most important part of the game, wouldn't you agree?
I wouldn't know, I don't wear armor. I think I see why the dialogue sucks.
Ultimately, it comes down to the dialogue not being very relevant. And at other times when the dialogue supposedly does matter, the options are very basic and most don't really influence the mission that you are completing. As well as that, your character is limited to a couple personality choices. But that's it from me. Remember to get good.
I'm already good.